in domestic vehicles. Our sponsor, Launch, will be using the Launch die gun, and this works on not only this 2002 GM we're working on, but brand new ones like some 2011 Malibus and some Impalas, besides other vehicles. At any rate, what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go in, select the die gun here. But before I do that, I want to say at any time during the webcast, if you have a question, Craig is behind the camera, please type it in, and Craig will then ask me the question, and we'll get back to you. So let's click in here, show you how this works. As we're going through, I'll tell you a few things. Once we get into complete diagnostics here, we'll do a system check of every computer on the vehicle. So right now it's resetting the smart box. And by the way, you know, anytime you're on a vehicle, and you see it came up, anytime you're on a vehicle for a long time like we're doing here, you know, the webcast is about an hour. We have obviously the intro there and some questions at the end again. But when you're doing that or working on a car in your shop, especially these new vehicles, make sure you use a battery tamer, not a battery charger, a battery tamer. That's very important. You can look back to some of our other P10 webcasts for that. Okay, so right here I have different systems. We're going to do GM Diagnose. Oh, excuse me, go back. A little hard working upside down
Tilt
here.
a little more this way.
Okay. We're going to do fast scan DTCs. So that's a selection. Then we'll go into GM Diagnose. And we're going to do all system scan. All system scans going to go through every computer on this vehicle. Now with that said, I want you to be aware that it does tell you it may take about I timed it out about 6 to 8 minutes. So it's going through. As that's going through, I'd like to tell you some of the things that you're going to need to know on some of these brand new vehicles, GM in particular. Do you realize when you change an oxygen sensor on a lot of these new vehicles that you're going to need to go in and you're going to need to do a relearn? Okay? The Launch scan tool allows you to do the relearn. Now, there's not many scan tools out there that can do that. This is not a sales pitch. This is just telling you that you need this type of equipment to do that. You need to do some programming or a SDM and a handshake, a body computer, and the airbag system and security system. Sometimes you change a module, and now if you don't have the tool that's going to speak back and forth to it, then you're going to run into a problem. So we can do that with the Launch scan tool here. We could also do, and we'll do this on this vehicle tonight, an injector balance test. We'll do some other bi-directional controls. So you can check evap systems. So you can check to see if windows or lights or horns are working. This does body, chassis. We'll go through all the different systems that it does, just like the factory scan tool. So as we're going through, we're on some other module here. It's checking electronic suspension, which doesn't have. It'll go through and look for different modules that GM, just like if you were using the factory tool, that GM says there's a possibility of that particular one being on. So as we're waiting for this to go through, if you have any questions, you could ask right now and we could kind of answer them as we go through. The other thing we'll go on is we'll look at the Onstar system on this car. This car being a little older, the people did not renew it, but I'll show you what it looks like there. We can go in and do idle relearns if it had electronic throttle. This one does not have electronic throttle, although this year had an option for it or without it. Okay, Craig has a question.
Is it true that on the newest GMs you actually have to relearn oxygen sensors or air fuels if you replace them?
Yes, I just went over that. Heated oxygen sensors need to be relearned. And by the way, you know, you're not only going to see this on GM, but other domestic cars you need to go in there. Other great test we can do with the scan tool is bidirectionally to check the oxygen sensor heater and use something like you have in your shop, a handheld amp clamp or something maybe from a lab scope type of amp clamp. Any other questions, Greg?
No.
Okay. So right now it should be coming up with some information here. Transmission adaptations, very important, doing resets when you're working on a transmission or you had a drivability problem. Remember, transmissions and engines go hand in hand. If we have a transmission that's not shifting right, you could think you have some sort of engine problem, and vice versa. Let's say we had a clogged catalytic converter, we could think the transmission is a problem, but it's really not. Okay. So as this thing is continuing to go through, we're going to look at the different systems on this GM vehicle. So, you know, once it's doing all of these things here, doing all of these scans, never interrupt, the tip, never interrupt your scan tool when it's going through and doing it. Okay? So let it go through and complete its test, and then it'll come up and tell us what systems that have a problem. Now, why is this important for you guys? When you're working out there on a vehicle, and by the way, we're doing this live, so things may happen. I forgot to mention that in the beginning. Sometimes things don't go as planned, but we're hoping everything goes as planned. At any rate, when you're working on a vehicle, why do you want to do this scan type of test? You want to do this because you're out there to fix the vehicle, diagnose it, fix it, and also make money, and alert the customer of a problem that may be in a different system. This vehicle, you'll see, comes up as a few different problems in different systems, so it's a good one to look at. So right now it's scanning the fuel pump, the trailer brake, if it has it. That's going through every option that the factory tool would go through. By the way, I want to remind you, when you first go onto this screen, it does tell you that it's going to take about 10 minutes. It should take a little less. When we're done with this, we're going to pick the specific year and go into the specific systems. So in other words, if you didn't want to do this, you don't have to. You can go right in and pick a specific controller or specific system. You don't have to go through every one of them. I want to show you, in my opinion, this is a very, very important thing to do. There is a couple of OEM manufacturers out there that do this. As soon as you connect to their vehicle with the factory tool, it scans all the systems for problems. And again, yes, you do have to wait. Go get a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or some water or whatever. It's okay as this is going through. And it feels like this is forever. Any questions out there while we're waiting? Because we'll see some neat stuff come up in a second. And we'll tell you a couple of things about battery maintainers, I guess, while I'm waiting here. Make sure you use a maintainer. Why? Because we don't want to use a regular charger that's going to put out some high AC voltage. Okay? If you put some high AC voltage out, we'll run into some problems. And we don't want to skew the system. And by the way, these newer cars, the newer the vehicle, you've probably seen us on some webcasts with some 2010s, some 2011s, you know, some late model vehicles that we've done before, where I can tell you within the hour's time, sometimes the batteries go dead on the vehicle because there's so many things running. So always use a maintainer out there. And now I'm done with my yak, and look what came up. Now we went through every controller. It'll tell us if something's normal or a fault. On this first page alone, it tells us we have an airbag problem. It has a fault. Let's look on the next page. It tells us here I have a fault on the air conditioning system and the vehicle interface module, control modules. So now you can tell the customer, hey, I have information here for you with these faults. If I click on a fault like I just did, it tells me that diagnostic trouble codes, I got a B body code, 2462, a global positioning sensor problem. Okay? So that comes up with the Onstar, because I looked at this earlier. It also tells us we have a U code, that's a code of networking problems. We have another U code, a class 2 type of code. And we also have a keep alive memory reset, a B1004. and a B10100, which is an ECM malfunction gateway problem, okay? So we have a few different problems here going on. Now, what we're going to do, we read the trouble codes. We're going to go back and we can look at any one of these, okay? So if I want to look at a fault in the airbag system, I can see I have a B0029 passenger side deployment loop open. So that means we have an issue there on the airbag, okay? Now again, this was all done with the health check. Now, let's get out of here because you may be going, well, I'm not interested in the health check. You should be, but in case you're not, we're going to back out and we're going to go to GM Diagnostics. And here's another way how you can get in. We pick the year of the vehicle. It's a light duty vehicle here. We're going to pick powertrain first. Let's do powertrain. This is a Z5.3 V8, and this does not have electronic throttle, so I got to pick without throttle actuation control. And how many of you guys out there and gals are having problems with these electronic throttles? Okay, a lot of times they need to be relearned, or the adaptation on them needs to be reset, which is basically like a relearn. So here, I have diagnostic trouble codes, which is always a good thing to look at in the engine controller. Let me read codes. Remember, never erase codes. Always read them first. So it says no codes there, so we're okay. We're going to return, and we're going to do data display. I'm going to show you some of the data display that comes up here. Quite a bit of information is going to populate here. It's telling us that is the VIN on the car, and now it's going to populate it. Always check the VIN. The last digits of the VIN were 470. I usually look at the last 3 or so. And now what it's doing, it's going to build all of the PIDs, the parameter identification, right in, and we can view them on the scan tool. So we're about 35% done. In a few seconds it'll be done. I don't know if there's any questions so far or any comments. So now we're at about 60% done. So give it a few seconds there and we'll be in to look at all the parameters. Okay, so it's getting real close to it.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Are we gonna have to code batteries on the new GMs, like on BMWs?
Good. Are we going to have to code batteries, Craig asked, like on the new GMs? Well, they're talking about that, and as you know, one system to another system, just like keyless entries that only the Europeans had years back, now domestics and everyone else has it. Now, since I answered that question here, this all comes up, we have a whole bunch of different things we can go into. Engine data, okay, engine data 1 and 2, EGR, EVAP, fuel data, O2, misfire, transmission stuff. Now, why would you want to go into, let's say, EVAP? We want to look at specific EVAP PIDs if we had, let's say, an EVAP problem. We wanted to work on EVAP. I'm going to pick engine 1 first to give you an idea of what we're looking at here. Okay, so we have all of these different things here from engine speed down, Barrow, TP, long-term fuel trim. You know, 4 pages, 5 pages of information just on engine 1. These are all parameters. Now, if I want to highlight them all and have them all come up with information, I can do that. And we're going to look at this, and pretty soon we'll start the vehicle up. Okay, so once you select, by the way, you shouldn't select every single one of them like I'm doing here, unless that's what you want to look at, everything. You want to have just the PIDs that you really need. So here it'll be coming up. Okay, so now I have all my data on the screen. Okay.
Can I interrupt 1 second?
Sure.
There were some technical difficulties. Do you mind recapping how we started on the vehicle, what we looked at, and where we are now? Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Since this is live, like we said, you know, sometimes internet or whatever it is, technical difficulties. Way beyond anything I can do. Okay. I only have the G there, by the way, so there's not much I can do. You know, if I had an O and D, I'd be okay, but I can't do that. So things happen. Let me tell you where we started. We started with the GM icon on the screen. We did a full system scan. The full system scan showed us every module on the vehicle, and it came up with a lot of different DTCs from airbag, body control, chassis control. We looked at all that. We also went in, and now we're looking specifically. You don't have to go through that. We said that takes approximately 6 to 10 minutes. Took us about 6 minutes, okay? If you want to go into a specific controller like engine, you could do it instantly. I now went into engine 1. You're probably familiar with this by looking at your scan tool. Engine 1, engine 2, EVAP, EGR. Why would we want to use those particular PID sets? If we had a problem with EGR, we'd like to select EGR. So that's about up to where we are right now. Now, there's some very, very important PIDs that you should be looking at on a vehicle. First of all, this vehicle was running, but if we start with a cold engine, what parameters do you want to look at? Cold engine. Right, you want to look at CTS and IAT. What's CTS? Coolant temperature sensor. IAT, intake air temperature. When the vehicle is cold, you should be within 5 to 10 degrees of each other on a GM. Okay? If they're not there, then you're going to need to take your meter out and check it. The first thing I do before taking the meter out is open circuit the intake air temperature sensor and see if my scan tool shows me -40. I do the same with the coolant sensor. Since they're a 2-wire circuit, okay, we could take a jumper wire. Now only do this on sensors. Do not do this on any actuators. This is the intake and air temperature sensor and coolant temperature sensor that I'm speaking about. Take a jumper wire, jump the 2 terminals like this, go into it and jump it, and what you should see is a high temperature. High temperature. If you're looking at voltage, the voltage at that point should be very low. If you unplug it again or disconnect the wires you just jumped it with, you should see approximately 5 volts. That would at least tell us the wiring and the computer are seeing the right information. You'd want to look for possibly a bad sensor or a bad connection. Okay. So now another thing we need to look at on the list is go down, and there's my intake air temperature right there, but there's something here called baro. Okay. We'd also like to take a peek at that, so I'm going to hit next and see where, there's my baro. Okay. Baro is very, very important to know that we're at sea level. Okay. So you could take the kilopascals that's this in, or the barometric pressures in inches, and then look at that or convert it or do whatever you want. Make sure we're about a couple hundred feet above sea level here in New York, so we're really not high up. It does make a difference if the baro's off. If baro is off on your scan tool, then what's going to happen to timing and what's going to happen to fuel delivery? You guessed it, they're going to be wrong. Okay, so it's something to look at when you first start. Now we're going to start the vehicle up, and one of the things I do like to look at is fuel trim. Okay, it's going to get a little noisier as I start it up. Okay, so give me a second here to start the vehicle up, and we're going to start doing some neat stuff. We're going to do some bidirectional controls as well.
By the way, when you're starting it up, do you know if the software engineers at launch have updated for Buicks and GMC Terrains?
tell this vehicle has a problem. I'm not sure. I can tell you this. Launch has done, to date, over 700 updates this year. I just updated my tool yesterday. Okay? There's so many updates. Constantly go looking at the web and something new coming out in the near future from Launch. All you need to do is put your card in the reader. That's that little reader that comes with this, the little card that comes out of the top of this baby. And you plug it in, go to the Launch website, it'll automatically give you all the new updates. So you won't have to take some off, put some on. It's going to be all nice and automated. So let's look at some stuff here. And since I'm on the mass airflow sensor and the map sensor on this vehicle, mass air, we have a rule of thumb. Do you guys know what the rule of thumb is? We said this was a 5.3 liter, okay? We need at least 1 gram per liter. So my mass air on here is 5.51. I'm happy with that. I don't have a clogged air filter or a bad mass airflow meter. I also can look at fuel trim. Now fuel trim long term is 3. Not that bad, because, you know, if we had a problem, we'd be somewhere up in the 10 area most likely. And by the way, don't mind the squeaky belts on this car. A little squeaky. Let's go to the previous page. We can see things like ECT. We can also graph everything, which is neat. We can see right here on the graph, I was at 0 RPMs, and when I started it up, could they see that, Craig, on that end? You could also do this with engine speed going up. ECT, we can see how it dipped down, then came up. And look at the slant, how the engine is warming up. Okay? Same with IAT. Air-fuel ratio, lambda, that GM likes putting on their tool. And a lambda of what is good? A lambda of 1. Now, under 1, a lot of people get this confused. Under 1 is not lean, under 1 is rich. Over 1 is not rich, over 1 is lean. So let's see if you have any questions or comments out there that I could answer for you.
Jared asked, is that a good rule of thumb for all manufacturers, 1 gram per liter? I think he's referring to the mass airflow.
For the mass airflow that he's asking the question, yes. A good rule of thumb, 1 gram per liter. Good question.
How far could it stray one way or the other?
That is a good question. How far? I would give it less than a gram, about 3/4 of a gram one way, lower. Above, we don't care. Now, when it's higher above, watch where the desired idle is. Now, what do I mean by desired idle? This thing had a desired idle before, I think of about 500, yeah, here we go, 550 desired idle. Now, if my desired idle is 550 and my RPM is 700, of course my grams are going to be more than 1 gram per liter. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So Craig's trying to zoom in on this a little bit more. Good angle? Okay. So again, desired idle is something to look at. Sometimes we take this stuff for granted where we go, desired idle, what do I need to look at that for? You need to look at that because that's going to tell you all the specifications. Okay. So, let's go out of this and let's look at EGR data. And now with EGR data, we can see, very, very important, EGR position. Do you guys know to look at this and why we want to look at EGR position? you guessed right. EGR position has to be 0. Very, very important. Why? Because the position sensor is going to show us where the pintle is. If the pintle is up because a piece of carbon is under there, how's the engine going to run? You're right, not so good. Okay? So I always look at EGR position. Okay? We also can see the voltage. We can see the actuator position, if it's being commanded on or not. There's our mass air. There's our temperature. There's our engine load. On this vehicle, only a 2% load at idle. Another tip we want to give them on load. Okay? What do you think we want to tell you on engine load? Now, it's a way better idea to take the vehicle out and graph this. So if I did do graph, and I get down to engine load, when you're driving down the road, when you get load, right here, engine load, I passed it, sorry about that. When you get down to engine load, you want 90% load at full throttle. Now, could you do this in your bay? Yeah, chop the wheels for safety, put the e-brake on, even if it's a standard, chop the wheels, you know, lift the clutch up a little bit, or in this case, hold your foot tight on the brake in an automatic, load it up, and see if you can get 90%. What that's going to tell us is volumetric efficiency. In other words, can we get enough air into this engine so the engine itself could operate properly? Now, a lot of times when you don't get 90%, you may have a defective mass airflow sensor, okay? A lot of these you can't clean on GM, some you can, but this particular one you cannot, okay? Always check to make sure you got voltage and ground going to it. And if it is one you can clean, I'm sure you're all familiar with the ones on the Fords, okay? That is something that's quite easy to use mass airflow sensor cleaner, okay? So what I'd like to do here, you can see our engine load is real low. I'm going to load this up. And as I'm loading it up, you should see that number come up. Graphing, by the way, is great. And it's always a good idea to put it in reverse so you don't kill anyone in front of you. And make sure it's going behind you.
Not letting me even see it on the computer.
Okay, so what I did there is I really loaded it up. Look at our load. Our load went to the top. Okay. And that is an important thing to look at. If we didn't get up there, getting a calculated load up, we could have a problem. Okay. So our idle, by the way, is still pretty good. We got good ignition voltage. That's also something to look at and you could have a problem with. And now what we'll do is let's go into some special functions. Special functions, and we're going to do engine controls. Engine controls, so you're going to see some things that we can do with this. Here we're going to do, let's do fuel system first. Cylinder balance. Now, if you weren't aware of this, cylinder balance is good to do because we can use a gas analyzer and put that in the tailpipe and look at hydrocarbons per cylinder. Or the oxygen content, in other words, the air we're breathing, O2, or CO2, carbon dioxide, to see how each cylinder is actually contributing. So I want you to listen, because you know the important tools you have, your brain, your eyes, your ears, your nose, your hands. Here the ears will come in. I'm going to hit this balance test here. Tells me to chop the wheels, all the safety functions. AC unit got to be off. And now injector 1, I'm going to do that. And you notice on the screen, I could disable it. So I'm going to hit disable.
Wow.
And you can hear that the engine is cutting out. I'm going to enable it. You don't want to do it for too long. Another thing you can do, if you have a lab scope, as you're cutting the cylinder out, we could see, is it the ignition coil coming out, or is it the fuel? Since this is the fuel system, you should see the fuel injector cutting out. Okay? So we can do this for all of the cylinders, which is a good idea to do. Because we want to make sure that every cylinder is actually operating. So there we go there. Before this thing disabled, we'll exit. And by the way, there is a timeout function on this, meaning the computer will only allow you to do this so long. So now I'm going to do injector 3. We want to make sure, again, all the cylinders are working good. As soon as you see disabled up here, now it's cutting the cylinder out. Okay. Go back out of it. We'll do cylinder 4. You can also do this if you think you have a leaky injector. Okay, that worked good. You could put a fuel pressure gauge on this and go through from your scan tool and make each injector pulse to see what the pressure drop is per cylinder. So what do I mean? We put our fuel pressure gauge, and if we had 50 pounds, let's say, or 60 pounds on this thing, if that's our pressure to start with, we then hit the button, watch on our scan tool, hit the screen, watch the pressure go down, which would tell us if it went from 60 to 50, okay, that's one cylinder, we write it down. The next one went 60 to 40. The other ones all went 60 to 30, okay. We could see that a couple of the injectors are not spraying the same amount of fuel, and they may be clogged or dirty, okay. So we only have 2 more to go here. Okay, so you get the idea. I'm not going to do the rest of them. There's 8 cylinders here. Let me exit out. So here's the other thing here, fuel trim enabled. Fuel trim reset. Now I like that one. Fuel trim reset. Why would you want to do this? It's not like these GMs are not notorious for bad fuel pumps, right? Of course they are. So you have a bad fuel pump, a bad fuel filter, whatever. Why do you need to reset fuel trim? This is an adaptive reset. By the way, this is something GM had way back, even back in the 80s, okay? When you have a fuel problem, you always want to reset the adaptive trim. Meaning, rather than the fuel trim from a bad fuel pump maybe being positive 15, okay? You don't want to send the car out the door with a positive 15. You'd like to reset that fuel trim, okay? With this enables us to do it by hit reset, and it says reset. So that makes our fuel trim go right back down to 0. And of course, fuel trim is one of our important friends on a car. It helps us diagnose the problems. Okay. You could also enable fuel trim if it was disabled for some reason. So we got that function, we put that on, and fuel trim is enabled now. So pretty neat, good information here. By the way, if you ever want to print a screen, you can always print stuff. Let's go to some of the other engine outputs. Whoa. You can put things like the malfunction indicator lamp on inside. AC relay, Egr Solenoid. Now this one has an EGR problem. So we can look at the Egr solenoid here, and as we hit increase, you'll notice this value number come up. Now I'm at 10%, meaning the valve should be opening 10%. What should we be noticing? We should be noticing the engine running a little roughly. I'm going to bring it all the way up. If the EGR passages were clean, when I get about 40%, the thing should kind of die. Now I can tell you we have an EGR problem on this. I'm at 60%, 70, and we don't really hear much engine flutter, a little bit, but not a lot. Telling me the EGR passage is clogged. 90%, 100%. Thing should be stalling out. Okay. So clogged passage is a good way to check it. You can do this with bidirectional on your scan tool. Okay. We don't have an air system here. We can check the O2 heater control. Now I like doing this. A lot of oxygen sensors, and we briefly spoke before about putting new oxygen sensors in a 2009, 10, 11 vehicle, okay? I know definitely on 2010, some 9s I believe, the later ones. When you put a new oxygen sensor in, yes, you need the scan tool that kind of relearn it or let it know it's there. It's an adaptation, okay, this relearn that I'm talking about for the O2. But how about the heater? How many times you come across what we say an O2 sensor is lazy or an O2 sensor is not working? We need to check the heater. With this, I can put heater on, okay. When it's commanded on, like I have here, I can take my amp clamp and see what the current draw is. I should see over an amp current draw. This goes through the relay. If not, I have a bad O2 relay, an bad O2 heater. Okay, I need to see that circuit works. Let's exit that. So these are some of our engine controls. We can go into transmission outputs just to give you an idea. We can reset the adaptations on that. Very important. Excuse me one second. Okay, so if we wanted to reset the adaptations on it, we could go in and actually reset it. Shift solenoid, so we can test shift solenoid 2 and 3. Again, good idea with your amp clamp. When I hit them, go down, look at a wiring diagram, whether from the PCM or TCM on a vehicle, clip it on. If you get no current flow, that solenoid's not working. Okay. So there's some of the systems here that we have. We also have a whole bunch of automatic controls for four-wheel drive indicator lights. You can make sure a bulb check is always important to do. The high-low indicator, a motor, I don't think we'll hear anything. Or transfer case locks. Remember, using your scan tool for bidirectional control saves you a lot of time. That's why the manufacturers put it in. A lot of people, or a lot of technicians I should say, don't use most of the bidirectional controls on a tool. They're not sure why or when should I use bidirectional controls. When should I use bidirectional controls, you ask? You should use it when you have a problem in that circuit. Let's say in a transmission. 2-3 shift is not going for some reason. Well, let's see if the solenoid works, right? Rather than ripping stuff apart, we could command it through our scan tool. If you want to back it up with an amp clamp or put your meter in series, you can see what type of current draw we have on that solenoid. No, it's not like these solenoids don't go bad, right? Okay, let's exit out of here. and let's look at other systems that we have. Oh, one other thing here in engine. Module setup. Engine speed control, if it has electronic throttle. This one does not. But we could do that with the IAC motor, couldn't we? So I got 1500 here, so I can see if the IAC is moving back and forth. Also, another thing you should be looking at. IAC motor sometimes is working good, but the throttle plate gets coked up. What do I mean coked up? It gets all that black tarry stuff on there, needs to be cleaned. Now warning, 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 if we have electronic throttle, be careful spraying cleaner in there. You know, follow directions, never ever spray any cleaner on the electronic unit itself. It's okay to spray it on a rag, wear protective gloves if need be. Clean the area up, because if the throttle plate is not good, when you try to go down in idle here, do you see this? I went all the way down, and I'm going to exit it out. You can hear the motor almost stalled out. If my minimal air rate, what's minimal air rate? Minimal air rate is the throttle angle being set properly. If that's not set properly, because it's coked up, the throttle plate is a little more open because of carbon buildup or coking, then of course you have to clean it. Okay. So let's return out of here. You can do oil light reset. And here's a very popular one. How about those tough monitors to run? I know Craig here runs a shop, and sometimes, and here in New York we have an inspection program, that monitors must be ready. Now, even if you don't have an inspection program, if the monitor is not ready, you don't know if you're going to get a DTC in the car, okay? Now, with all vehicles except Volkswagen, Audis, Nissan, and Infiniti, with the appropriate scan tool, you could run the monitors in the bay. Yes, you heard me right. You can run the monitors in the bay following the prompts on the scan tool. May have you race it up or put your foot on the brake and race it up, whatever. You could run monitors. Every other vehicle, you're going to need to take it for a ride down the road. You shouldn't be driving hours, by the way, because here's one problem that I'm showing you right here on the tool. You know, if crankshaft relearn is not ready or set on this vehicle, you will not see misfires. Other monitors may not set. What do I mean by other monitors? The EGR may not run. The oxygen sensor may not run. This is all important stuff to look at. Now, GM has this specific setup for crankshaft relearn. Some vehicles, like some Chryslers or Fords, you may run down the road at a specific speed, 30 miles an hour, go down slow, come back up, whatever the manufacturer wants you to do. Here, it gives me a list of different vehicles. So for V8, like we have here, it would tell you 4,000 RPMs. It says accelerate to wide open throttle. You got to put the brake on, press it all the way down when you hit this. The engine then does the cutout, meaning the idle goes up and down. Now, another warning, warning, warning. I had this once when I was teaching up in Alaska. Someone wasn't paying attention. The vehicle on the engine tag, like we have over there in the mass airflow box, has to say it's OBD2 compliant. Now you'll go, it has an OBD2 connector plug, a 16 cavity plug. I don't care. It doesn't matter. What matters is if it says that the vehicle is OBD2 compliant. If it is, then crankshaft relearn can be utilized, meaning we could apply the park and brake, follow the directions, put the foot on the regular brake, mash the pedal to wide open throttle, and the vehicle should give us the cutting out type of feeling. Okay, you'll hear the engine high RPMs cutting out, coming back. That will reset the camshaft, crankshaft relearn. and then it'll tell you it's learned. Very, very important if you want to run monitors and find that. We're not going to do that here because of lack of time. Okay, we do want to show you more stuff in other systems. Do we have any questions there, Craig?
People keep asking if that's a PDA with software or if that's the scan tool.
This is a special scan tool that Launch makes as a protective end. It is a Windows-based type of system, but this is what you get when you purchase the Launch die gun. Okay, I think they have it in different versions as well. Asian and domestic or Euro, right? I think there's different versions of it. Good tool. Now let's look at the body. The body has to come up with, and I got to look at the VIN, the K. So I picked the right VIN. It's a Chevy truck. And now I'm in the body control module. So I can do stuff. Let me show you. I'm going to shut the engine off right now. Okay, so we could go into, if I just return there to show you where I was, I went into Onstar. Now there's not many scan tools out there that can go diagnose Onstar. Now most people I know, you're going, I don't have customers that want to do that. Well, some people do want to do that. I can tell you on my Chevy Volt, I use Onstar, it's phenomenal, okay? Not a plug for Onstar, but it's good information, okay? So if you had a problem when it's not communicating, first of all, you can see if you got any DTCs, okay? Current DTCs, and it tells me I do. I got a B2462 global positioning. Now what happens if you don't pay your OnStar bill like this guy, okay? The owner of this vehicle didn't pay the OnStar bill, so what do? They shut it off, okay? But you can get in and do full diagnostics on it. You can clear codes, test codes, look in history. You can see the ID information on the module here. I'll look at module 2 real quick. It'll tell us the 8-digit part number and the electronic number. So here it is pretty good information if you had to order the part from the dealer or any aftermarket. So right here, look at this. Comes up with the 8-digit part number right there. That's pretty cool. Okay, especially if you're diagnosing it. So now let's look at other stuff. I know you don't want to look at any more OnStar. Big brother watching, right? So let's get out of OnStar and let's look at other stuff. You can see instrument cluster, mirror modules, driver information center. Okay, the airbag system, vehicle theft. I'm going into output controls. Door lock test. I'm going to lock all doors.
Whoop.
I don't know if you heard that nice clickety. Take them off. Put them on. You can hear the click. Okay. Now, this again comes in handy if I'm diagnosing a customer complaining, you know, the doors don't unlock or one door won't unlock. I could use this and locate a wiring type of problem or a module problem. Okay? So now when we exit, releases what we did. We can look at light test. You know, if we wanted to see the headlights work, okay? The headlights work. Beautiful. We have light again. Okay? We'll turn them off. So you get the idea. With bi-directional, we can check all these different systems on the car. And it's in this tool. Pretty powerful. Do we have any questions out there why we want to do this or anything, Craig?
Actually, no.
Okay. So let's move on. I'm going to exit here. And we're going to go into, okay, so there's all the parking stuff there. Let's do return. You could do mirrors, power mirrors down, miscellaneous tests. You know, like if you want to hear the horn go. That'll wake you up. Okay. So again, we can do bidirectional is very helpful. As a technician, when I want to know something is going to work or not work, I'm going to go to my scan tool and use bidirectional control. Okay. Let's get into and of course you can see diagnostic trouble codes and all that. Let's look at the chassis of the system here. Okay? And we were okay, digit. Now here's where we have some problems. I'm going to read some codes. I told you this vehicle came in with issues, which is good. And right away it tells me I got a C0221 right front channel in ABS released too long in ABS. So there's something in the channel itself, meaning the ABS system, the relief valve, the dump valve as they call it, there may be an issue right there. Okay. Also we have a left front wheel speed sensor circuit shorted. The circuit is shorted. So the wiring, when we see short, there's a problem in the wiring. Now you can check that circuit. I'll give you a quick tip what you can do. When we have a wiring circuit or circuit voltage low, okay, what I like to do is disconnect from the computer, and I'll say this again, disconnect from the computer, use something like a power probe and a meter. Now, you can use jumper wires with power fuse, but again, you can use something like a power probe. When we have the wires disconnected, we can go from the computer, and let's say these are the computer wires going out, these two wires. I could put 12 volts here. If it pops the 8 amp breaker in the power probe, I got to short the ground. The other end of the wire, I could put my meter on that. I can put my meter on alert. Alert means it's going to go beep or hold, so I can see if I put 12 volts through, did I get 12 volts there? Now, two things could happen. I could put 12 volts through, and this time the circuit didn't blow, it's not a short to ground. But at the other end where the meter is, let's say I only get 7 volts. I have a voltage drop, don't I? Meaning I got corrosion or bad connection, something going on in that wire. The other thing I like doing when I have voltage here, I like checking the wires at the end. Both of the wires at the end. Meaning, if I had a short to power where both of these wires were touching, I could get 12 volts on both of the wires. So that's a good way to check something like that. Okay. Now, when you have something like that that's a hard code, once you record that, also look at history codes to see how long it's in there. And now, wow, history codes I get a lot more. I get the right front wheel speed, which is a C222. I get the right front speed sensor, which is open, it says, a 021. I get a left front, a 0226, okay? And I get a 0225 left front wheel circuit open. So I got 4 codes that were there at one point, okay? We're going to clear the trouble codes and see if they come right back. If it comes right back, that means you got a hard fault, a code immediately. Okay. So it's erasing DTCs, it says it's okay. Let's read current codes. We still get 2 codes that come back. Because again, we have a problem with a release circuit and we have a short. So sometimes when you have something like that, that'll be an issue. Okay. Special functions, we can run the ABS motor. I don't have gas tonight. I ate tacos yesterday night, okay? So what you hear in the background is not from me, that is from the ABS motor. It sounds a little hairy, by the way. Okay, so we'll shut it off. So again, this comes in handy. You can do different things here to bleed brakes. I believe they have that in here. Okay. Yep, automated bleed. So you can do bleeding of the brakes. Okay. Now that's helpful. I don't need to yell, "Hey Bob, press your foot down on the brake, pump it up." I don't need to do that. I could go right from here and do the bleed test. Okay. You could do tire size calibration. You know, important, by the way, especially when you're dealing with, this is an automatic four-wheel drive. When you change tires, just a tidbit of information. Change tires, you should have the same tire depth on all the wheels. You should have the same tire thread on all the wheels. A lot of people make these mistakes and they wonder why they wind up with transfer case problems, tranny problems, okay, or wheel hopping. You should have the same depth of tire thread and you should have the same tire on there. So we can do that. We can do a system identification to see the information on the system. Okay, so it tells me the software, which is good. I can do a complete solenoid test. I'm going to do the left front valve here. So the valve is on, or it's commanded on. Doesn't necessarily mean it's on when it says it's on. Now, when that valve is on, we should be getting some current going there, right? Because this is a solenoid. So that is important. Okay. So these are different things that you can look at diagnosing. Now, we need to do some review of what we looked at. Launch is getting us into these different systems to where we could actually do bidirectional controls, we could relearn certain things, we could check everything out through our scan tool. Okay. So now, Craig, is there any questions, because we're about at an hour, about out of time. Nope. If you have any questions, by the way, that in case we don't answer them right now, please email them and we'll make sure we'll get back to you. And if you had any technical difficulties, I believe we have this pretty much taped, so you can look at it later. Any questions, Craig, that we can go over real quick before we thank everyone?
I'm trying to check now.
Okay, while Craig is checking for questions. Again, in review, these newer cars, you're going to need a tool with bidirectional control. You're going to need something that could relearn, whether it be an idle or any other thing that's on the vehicle. You're going to need, if you're in the diagnostic business, like I think we all are, to make some money, you're going to need not only to do engine stuff, but transmission, ABS, you know, everything I showed you tonight, interior stuff, windows, door locks, whatever, because guess what? You know, with the economy being pretty tough, we need to diagnose everything. We don't want to send anything away to any other shop or a dealer, okay? You do that, you're sending your money out the door. So we need to do that. We need to make sure we have the right equipment, know what we're testing, and when to test it. Okay. So any questions, Craig, or does not? Okay. No questions, so I want to thank our sponsor, Launch. I want to say on behalf of P10, Professional Tool and Equipment, you can check us out at www.pten.com. You could also look at TST, www.tstseminars.org. We have a webcast next Thursday night, the 22nd. That is a TST roundtable. And if you're interested in any type of hands-on training or any other training, G. Trulia from ATTS, Automotive Technician Training Service. We're out on the web, www.attstraining.com. I want to thank you, and I want to wish you and your family a very Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy everything in case I missed something, and Happy New Year. Best of health to everyone. Thank you for your time. Good night.